Good day, everyone. My name is Florence Okwudili, and you are watching U Multicultural Community Hour. I come from a culture where community defines the people. Community is everything. My culture believes that a thriving community is the foundation for fulfilling life potentials. We therefore place huge emphasis on making our community strong. This show is about our community, your community. Multiculturalism seeks the inclusion of the views and contributions of diverse members of society, while maintaining respect for their differences and withholding the demand for their assimilation into the dominant culture. Canada thrives on multiculturalism. Joining me here today is Brian Campbell. Brian is a freelance photographer, a writer, and author. I'm so thrilled to have you here, Brian.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, it's great to be with Brian. Brian first got my interest when I saw some of the pictures he has taken. Growing up in Africa, we encourage all animals to live. We believe that our community, animals are part of our community. And coming here in Canada, I know people like dogs, I know people like cats and other stuff, but what about the other animals? So when I came across Brian photographs, I was so impressed, and I was excited when I finally got to meet Brian. So Brian, welcome to the show. Tell me about the work you do.
Well, I don't consider the photography work. That's my relax. I've done a number of things during my time. Mainly, right now, I'm an author of 2 books, as you know. I'm a freelance writer. I'm working on my next book right now. That is my work, but I also consider that fun. When it comes to the photography, like I say, that's my relaxation. I like to get out in nature, unwind. I just happen to take my camera with me. And somewhere along the way, I discovered that animals are great subjects for photography. And I've had some that have been very, very good models for me.
Thank you very much, Brian. Our community involves everyone, the trees, the people, and the animals that the Creator have given to us. I was so amazed on the pictures of the birds that you have taken and even reading your books. So tell me, what interest do you have in going closer to the animals, the birds? And is there anything that particularly draws you to them?
Well, I grew up in rural Manitoba out in the Interlake. A lot of time there. This was before there was cable television out there, where we still had the old three channels on TV with very little to watch. I spent a lot of time walking out in the bush, being around animals, getting used to nature. My dad was a hunter, a fisherman, a nature lover. He never saw a whole lot of difference. He hunted for food in the off season. He enjoyed taking pictures and photographing animals and being around the country. So I grew up with that.
That's amazing.
Yeah. When I came into the city, I kind of got away from that for a while, and I still like to get out in nature, but it wasn't happening as much anymore. Mm-hmm. Then, ironically, COVID comes along, and there's nothing else you can do anymore. You're not seeing people, you're not seeing your family, you're not seeing your friends, you're not doing the things you used to do. I needed something to do to unwind. No. So I got back to nature again. I realized that very close to my home was Sturgeon Creek, and there were so many different animals. There are animals that I never even saw growing up in the country. Mm-hmm. At Assiniboine Park, you can get so much closer to the animals, especially the deer, than I ever got living out in the country. Deer don't come walking up to you in the country. At Assiniboine Park, they do.
Yeah.
So it became a fascinating new part of my life. During those 2 or 3 years where there was nothing else to do, I developed this whole new aspect, and I took my cameras along, I took pictures, and now it becomes a little complicated because our old life is back, but I now got a new part of my life I don't want to let go of.
Great, that sounds interesting. And I can relate to that because while growing up with my grandmother in the village, I remember that part of the things we do is watching out or listening to the birds. All the birds have their own distinct way of singing, and some of them tells you the time, some of them tells you that there is something around that is not supposed to be there. So I'm going to talk about one of your books that you have written, Out of This World. It really resonates with me and a lot of readers who are here to see the books. Brian was able to compile a whole list of stories. Tell me about this book and what's your intention for the reader to understand.
Well, Out of This World, my biggest love in writing has always been science fiction and fantasy. And up to this point, I haven't written a full-length novel yet. Both of my books are books of short stories. These ones are a little bit longer. Majority of the stories in there are science fiction or fantasy. However, the very first story, the one that you came to love, is not so much a fantasy story as it is a story about how these pictures came about, about my walking in the woods and visiting with the animals. My wife tends to call me Doolittle. She used to call me Dr. Doolittle, but I pointed out I'm not a doctor. But she calls me Doolittle because I talk to the animals. Not necessarily in their language.
Yeah.
But I'll stop and talk with geese. I'll hiss at them, and they hiss at me.
It's not a bad thing when we talk to animals. Our cats listen to us, right?
Oh, yeah.
And our dogs hear our voices and they know who we are. Yeah. So it's not a bad thing. Brian, thank you for being here with us once again. I also want to talk about Brian's work in the community, how he's trying to bring back the love for bird watching, I will say, going out and seeking out the little ones, the creatures in the bushes, and finding out how they can become a part of our relaxation. So tell me about your walk in the woods. How calming was it to you during the time of COVID?
It was very calming. It was my relaxing. It's what I called my happy place. It's when things are getting too stressful and too out of hand, I'd go for a walk in the woods. I commune with the animals, whether it's the chickadees or the deer or geese or whatever animals, and just be around them, and everything was okay again. It gave me the inspiration to come back and start work. It's mainly, that's why I probably put the first story in here about the animals, because if it wasn't for them, I wrote this between 2020 and 2023, I don't think I would have been able to without the calming influence those animals gave me. So even though they're not, their story is not a fantasy story, they made the stories possible.
Yes. Thank you so much. Brian mentioned something that I wanted to bring out in our discussion today, and that is coping during stressful times. During COVID times, it was so stressful, but Brian was able to use the love of animals and birds to distress the time. I am hoping that today some listeners will go back, will begin to think about the environment, because our environment is very, very important. I just want to tell you, what do you wish for people? I want to ask, what is your wish for people regarding your interests?
My wish for people, and fortunately or unfortunately, I kind of get away from my interests. My wish for people is that, and for all people, is stop being so obsessed with money and making money and people that have money and fame and all that, and just be more concerned about being part of our planet and a good steward to our planet. Just like we spend too much time. There's so much of our stress is involved in how are we going to make money? How are we going to get more money?
How we look, how we do things.
Yeah. How about worrying about, instead of yourself and your money, worry about somebody else, or worry about animals, or worry about nature. Just be part of the community. Don't be part of the whole. Don't be part of the problem. Try to be part of the solution.
Solution. I hear you.
Harry Belafonte, when he was talking about the famine in Africa, said, don't be overwhelmed by the magnitude of the problem. Just take that little piece that's yours and kick ass. Just do it.
Great. That's a good saying, and that's a great one for our time. Can you tell us of the one big challenge you are having concerning your interest in photography and in animal, looking into the animal world?
Well, I don't know that there's much of a challenge in the photography itself. And okay, let me think on this one. The photography is not much of a challenge. I take a number of pictures. Some were good, some were not so good. That's fine. And the animals are not the challenge either. It's probably bringing people into my world that's more of a challenge. And,
the love for animals is dwindling. You see that dwindling among younger generation?
I hope not. I like to take my grandkids out with me. I think show them my world, and they seem to enjoy it as well. So,
do you see a younger generation interest in taking bird watching, for instance, or just going into the bush looking at different types of species of animals? Do you see that interest growing or just diminishing?
I think these days the new culture is getting involved in your electronics. Stick your face in your phone or on your iPad or your computer and play your games and find out what other people are doing. We, once again, as I mentioned before, we spend too much time worshiping the rich and the famous, and not enough time enjoying the world that was given to us before the technology.
Good saying. I agree with you, Brian, and that is something for our viewers to take home with. A lot of time we spend on our iPads, on our phones, and sometimes in front of our televisions, but we can get out there and take a look at what nature has offered us, what nature has put in our environment. And also we might begin to think about how to nurture these creations of God.
Okay, the value I'm trying to pass on, I suppose, I'm just trying to bring some happiness to the world. Like, my values, I can only pass to a limited number of people. I pass to my kids, my grandkids, hopefully, and their friends, those close around me. I can only give what I don't know. In my books and in my pictures. In my pictures, I try to promote a love for nature and just an example of what's in our world, particularly. All these pictures are taken in Manitoba, mostly right around Winnipeg.
Wow.
So we have that here now. This is what we're missing when we spend our time in our technology.
Nah, thank you. Yeah.
But in my books, I want to release, maybe get out of the stressful world for a while into a new world, and just a little bit of escapism for a while and relax and provide some enjoyment. However, having said that, even in my fantasy stories, I try to send a message. Like, I've got one story in Out of This World is about a future where Earth's resources have been completely wiped out, and billionaires are now sending ships out to other planets to exploit their resources and use them up. And another counteragency, sort of the next generation of the EPA, try to stop them.
Oh, wow.
So it's a fantasy story, but it's
it's a good story. Viewers, I will recommend, if you're looking for something to read, something to pass the time with and learn more about animals and the birds, Brian has written 2 books, Out of My Mind and Out of This World. And each one of them is focusing on the environment and the people that shares and the things that shares the environment with us.
Well,
that's great, Brian.
Yeah.
If I also want the viewers to look at some of the works that Brian have made all around. The pictures that we see is part of his works.
Yeah.
What are you doing? You told me you are a grandfather and you take your kids to your grandchildren out with you sometimes. So Manitoba, we are all in this community together. So is there anything you are doing to ensure the continuation of these interests of yours, where other communities can learn from you? Is there anything you are doing to promote these interests?
Well, I have a limited ability to do this, but I do like go to craft shows and wherever and promote my pictures, promote my books, talk to people about where the pictures were taken, and the different animals that I've discovered, because growing up in the country, spending my childhood and some of my early adulthood out in the Manitoba Interlake, I didn't realize how many species of animals we have in Manitoba that I didn't even know that I've actually found in Winnipeg or around Winnipeg. So this has been surprising to me. I've always been a nature lover, but I'm learning more and more all the time. And I try to pass this information on to those who will listen to me. Like I say, my books are more of an escapism. They're not necessarily about my love for animals, but I think, or my love for the environment. But my thoughts and feelings come out in my writing. So, so the ideas are there.
I could attest to that. So, folks, talking about the growth of our community and making our community all inclusive, do you see even the school divisions, buying into, maybe inviting you into the schools so that we begin to put back that interest to our children in their mind, put that interest in their mind?
I'd never thought about it before, but it's not necessarily a bad idea. I'd be open to it.
Yeah, viewers, I guess the decision is yours. If you are watching this show this afternoon and you feel you need Brian to come in and talk to your community or to the kids in your school, for those of you that are in the school system, I feel that this is one way we can begin to reintroduce the idea of children finding interest in watching birds, watching animals, learning about the animals that are in our environment. Okay. Because when we think about Manitoba, what do we think about? Like you said, you never actually realize how many species of birds that we have, right?
And that's from the point of view of a nature lover.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm not just talking about how many species of birds, how many species of animals.
How many species of animals? And I bet you a lot of us, especially the newcomer community, does not even have an idea about what you are talking about. So, folks, if you're watching this show, I encourage you, please talk to your school system, talk to your community. Brian is available to come and show his pictures and teach your young ones and maybe reintroduce that idea back. I really want the idea of children learning all the animals, or some animals that are living in our environment.
Actually, may I add something? I want to give you a bit of an example here.
Yes.
I live in Crestview, very close to Sturgeon Creek. When I first started my walks, I started walking around Sturgeon Creek. I'm embarrassed to say I didn't realize what a wonderful walkway we had until COVID. If anything ever good came out of that.
Yeah.
But on the area of Sturgeon Creek, just where we were, there are ducks, there are geese, there are several species of ducks I didn't even know existed.
Yeah.
Cormorants have been there, pelicans, a heron, a blue heron this past year. There are beavers, muskrats, otters, a mink.
Wow. Wow. And a lot of us have no idea about all these animals. We think we have to go to the zoo to see them. Why don't you take your young ones along the creek?
This was Sturgeon Creek, but
Sturgeon Creek.
But I've walked along Seine River as well, and there's an amazing amount of deer there. There's squirrels. There's a number of different birds. I talked about Sturgeon Creek because that was the one that was closest to my home. I have to travel to Birdsville. I have to travel over to...
I am so happy to have you on this show today because I feel that our young ones are growing up, losing the interest in knowing more about the animals that the Creator have put all around us. I remember growing up as a child and My grandmother, when we go to visit my grandmother goes along the way like you were talking about, and sometimes it's like, oh, there is a snake, it's a big snake pass through this. And we were like, how do you know that? How do you know that? And it's like, look at the mark it has made. Or sometimes she goes, I wonder which animal is this. Okay? The footstep, and we are looking at the footstep, the footprints that they have made. And so we begin to learn the different footprints of animals. And from there we graduated to learning the sounds that the animals, the birds make in the morning, and midnight animals, early morning animals. And it was fun. It was fun. And I feel that young ones now are growing up without all this knowledge. Does that bother you?
Yeah. For example, I don't know if you're aware of this, but if you take a look at a white-tailed deer's tracks in the snow, quite often they look like broken hearts.
Wow.
They're two parts with a split down the middle.
Yeah. See, I'm not even saying that.
Yeah.
Wow. That's interesting. And it's good to know that in our community we have people that still have that interest. Viewers, I'm hoping that if you have learned one thing today, please take home. We need to begin to consider the animals that we have around us. Look out for them, and if possible, be able to feed them. I know my neighbors, some people feed the birds, some people feed the rabbits, and anything we can do. Yeah.
We do have a city bylaw now that says you're not supposed to feed the animals.
Oh, okay.
I won't say if I follow that bylaw or not. We're not going to talk about that.
But
there is a city bylaw that says we're not supposed to be feeding the animals anymore. That's just new in the last 12 months.
Really?
Just within the last. It just came up last year, last spring or something like that. There was a very new city bylaw.
Feed the animals?
Not supposed to feed the animals. I do understand it in some ways. In some ways I don't agree. Some ways I do agree. I've seen a lot of people feeding ducks and geese and birds and even deer bread. I'm not certain that bread's even good for humans, never mind the animals.
Yeah. Except the government must have a reason why they came about that. But I'm going back to my days living in Africa, and the fact that we take care of our animals, we do. And even the ones like the birds that we see, sometimes we you wash things and my grandmother will, instead of throwing the water away, my grandmother would say, just throw it on the ground. And then when it dries up, you see other birds coming to peck on the stuff that came out from the water. It's stuff that came with the water. But again, we don't know what they like. But like you said, the government must have a reason for doing that. But folks, thank you again for joining us, and it's been a wonderful discussion, knowing more about the animals, and I'm hoping that you have learned one or two things. Before we go, Brian, can you tell us one specific story about one specific bird that you have photographed or followed through the years?
Well, one specific bird, or what's this? I got to tell you a little story. Going over to Birds Hill Park, one of the first times, walking the Chickadee Trail down there. The Chickadee Trail is called Chickadee Trail for a reason. We started walking down there.
Okay.
The chickadees were chirping from the trees. The next thing you know, they're dive bombing us, just flying past our heads. It's getting very aggressive. And it took us a while to realize. I was out with my wife and one of my granddaughters. And it took us a while to realize why they were doing this. Everybody goes along there taking seeds for them. They expect to be fed.
Oh, okay.
I read since then I carry some sunflower seeds with me. Plain sunflower seeds, pet stores, the chickadees love them. And they're good for them.
Great.
And I read in a nature book that chickadees are so tame they can be trained to land on your hand. Well, when I walked along the bush there, chickadees will land on the bush beside me and chirp at me until I feed them. One of us has got the other one trained very well.
Whoa. Wow.
But I'm not sure who the trainer is here.
Yeah. And did they get to land on your hand? Or?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, there's one spot at Birch Hill Park where chickadees, red-breasted nuthatches, white-breasted nuthatches are so frequent that they'll fight over your hand. Like, they come nonstop. You stand there with your hand out, and there's one after the other, 2 or 3, and
Wow.
and there'll be aerial battles in front of your hand.
Wow, that's interesting. Folks, again, if you're looking for, it's amazing that we are hearing these stories right here, happening right here in Manitoba, happening right here in Winnipeg. Folks, are you as astonished as I am to learn that we can have birds feed on our hands right here in Winnipeg, not somewhere else, but right here where we are? And that is all about what we talk about community. That when we look around our community, we'll begin to see things that will make us want to make our community grow. Like going to be companions to the chickadees, like feeding them. Although the government said one sound, don't feed the...
That's Winnipeg municipal government. I don't know what they say at Birch Hill Park.
At Bethel. Okay, we'll look into that. Thank you so much, Brian. It's
one other thing.
Okay.
On top of wanting to teach people about getting back into nature, I want to get young people reading again. That seems to have been a lost cause, a lost art.
That's true. We can never underestimate the power of teaching children how to read. It improves their concentration and also helps them to begin to learn new skills and new life and stories about life in general. So, like Brian has said, Brian is an author to 2 books, and we are encouraging readers. If you're looking for storybook for your kids, for children to read, I recommend that you check out Brian's book. Brian, what's your website? If you can tell viewers your website.
It's briantherewriter.ca.
Folks, we have come to the end of our show today. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for watching U Multicultural channel. And thank you, Brian, for joining us. We have, on behalf of the community out, we have this as a present to say thank you for coming to this show.
Thank you very much.